Earlier today, ProPublica came out with, I think, one of the most fascinating bits of journalism looking at the Supreme Court that I have seen in literally years. And it profiles corruption being alleged against this guy, Clarence Thomas. When I say alleged, I mean they have a ton of evidence. They've done exhaustive research. And what they have uncovered, like, everybody is saying it has created a crisis of legitimacy on the court. I personally think that we've been in that since the Kavanaugh process. And I have no doubt that the status quo will be returned to in due course. But if we had any hope of reigning in the Supreme Court, getting any sort of like actual ethical guidelines, anything like that, this is the opportunity for it. And we're gonna give the details as revealed by ProPublica. So first of all, they start off by revealing that in June of 2019, right after the Supreme Court released its final opinion of the term, obviously Clarence Thomas was exhausted from all the work. They do occasionally meet and briefly do stuff. He then boarded a large private jet headed to Indonesia. He and his wife were going on vacation, 9 days of island hopping in the archipelago on a super yacht staffed by a whole bunch of private chefs and servants and attendants and all of that. Now, you might be wondering, how does a Supreme Court justice pay for this? Well, in this case, they do not. If he had paid for the 162-foot yacht and the trip and all of that, it could have cost more than $500,000, but he didn't have to. Because in addition to being very powerful in his own right as a member of the Supreme Court, he also has powerful friends, including real estate magnate and Republican mega donor Harlan Crow. I swear that's his actual name. You're probably thinking, well, that sounds like a villain you'd come up with in a story about political corruption. It does sound that way, doesn't it? No, he's real. He owned the jet, he owned the yacht, and he gave them to the Supreme Court justice for his use for 9 days. That, though, is not what this story is about. Or I should say, that's just one of the many things this story is about. Because for more than 2 decades, apparently, Thomas has been accepting luxury trips virtually every year from Harlan Crow. He flies on Crow's Bombardier Global 5000 jet. He's gone to the Bohemian Grove, an exclusive California all-male retreat, to Crow's sprawling ranch in East Texas. He typically spends at least a week every summer at Crow's private resort in the Adirondacks. The extent and frequency of these trips, there's no known precedent in the Supreme Court for anyone accepting one of these trips, let alone decades of these trips. They're not on Thomas's financial disclosures. And I'm gonna jump to the sauciest part of this. While there is very little like sort of ethical guidelines for Supreme Court justices, they do still have to register these sorts of gifts. Anything over, I believe it's $450. And so I think the $500,000 super yacht trip probably qualifies. These 2 decades of trips, that's what ProPublica has been able to find so far with the research. God only knows what else has been going on for decades. And Thomas has not said anything about this historically. And in response to this research, he is not responding to any questions about this obvious corruption. Wazzy, what do you think?
Yeah, it's people should not be surprised to learn that many people on the, or Clarence Thomas specifically, is a corrupt individual. I don't think anybody would be surprised. I think a normal person who spends, a normal amount of time thinking about politics probably thinks like somebody as important as Clarence Thomas makes a lot of money, and so therefore this would be normal. And no, this guy is a civil servant. I think the way our culture operates is that we think of everybody who is in the news as a celebrity, and so therefore super rich. It's like, no, this guy is a public servant. Okay, this guy works for the government. He works for us. He's not he shouldn't be operating like some fat cat. And what I would say to people is that the Supreme Court is barely a legitimate entity. It's one of the most anti-democratic entities that exists. There is no institution in public life that is as influential, as powerful, and is as anti-democratic, meaning nobody votes for these people and they have lifetime appointments, right? And I think progressives especially over the last 50 years or so, have tended on having a positive view of the Supreme Court because we think about stuff like Roe v. Wade, affirmative action, Brown v. Board of Ed, these Supreme Court cases that have opened up things for people as far as like civil liberties and civil rights. But that is not the history of this court. That's like a 30-year little nugget of time as compared to the overwhelming majority of the history of this court has been extremely corrupt, extremely anti-democratic, extremely reactionary. As far as I'm concerned, we could get rid of the Supreme Court tomorrow and it would be no sweat off my back because that institution has been, basically a thorn in the side of the people since its inception.
Yeah. It's generally served as one of the last defenses for the status quo.
Yep.
Like if the peasants get out of hand and finally overcome all of the structural hurdles to their will being reflected in public policy, well then don't worry, because we've got a get out of democracy free card in the Supreme Court. Generally, that is how it is served. And so for Thomas, we're gonna see. Is he going to respond to this at all? Will there be, the fact that the Republicans control Congress and will not give a damn about this. Consider what if it was Hunter Biden that was taking these trips? Like, come on.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.